Thanks for staying with us and welcome to this segment on the front burner. We're talking mental health or just stress. When should we take burnout seriously? Let's start with a question that may sound very simple. How are you? And how many of us, when asked that question, automatically respond, I'm fine? Even when we're exhausted, even when we're overwhelmed, even when we haven't had a proper night's sleep in days, even when going to work feels like a burden and answering a simple message feels like another task on an already endless to-do list. Sometimes we call it stress. Sometimes we call it tiredness. Sometimes we simply say this is adulting and we move on. But what happens when that temporary tiredness doesn't go away? What happens when the exhaustion becomes your normal? When you stop enjoying things you used to enjoy? When you're constantly irritated, emotionally drained, or unable to concentrate? When you wake up tired even after sleeping? And perhaps most importantly, when should we stop saying, I'm just stressed, and start taking what we're experiencing more seriously? This is an important conversation because mental health is often discussed as though there is a clear line between being perfectly fine and having a mental health condition. But real life isn't always that simple. Stress is a normal human response to difficult situations. The World Health Organization says it can affect both the mind and body, with symptoms including anxiety, irritability, difficulty concentrating, headaches, body pains, stomach problems, and sleep difficulties. Burnout, however, has a more specific meaning. The WHO classifies burnout as an occupational phenomenon rather than a medical condition. It describes it as a resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed with three key dimensions, which is exhaustion, increasing mental distance or cynicism towards one's job, and reduced professional effectiveness. And that's why today's conversation becomes particularly important because perhaps we have become so accustomed to being overwhelmed that we no longer recognize when something is wrong. So this morning we're asking, are we simply stressed or are we becoming seriously burnt out? And when should we stop pushing through and start asking for help? Let's quickly take a look at our talking points for today. Our first talking point, when does normal stress become too much? And then our second talking point, burnout, when I'm tired becomes I have nothing left. And the third talking point is when to ask for help. Joining us today on the show is Dima Amadi. She's a mental health advocate, consultant, coach, speaker, researcher, and founder of the Dima Amadi Mental Health Foundation with a background in law and professional certifications in clinical psychology, workplace mental health, and mental health leadership. She serves as head of operations at Therapy and Serenity Support, where she leads initiatives that expand access to quality and affordable mental health services while consulting with organizations on workplace well-being, leadership, and psychological safety. Them is also the host of the premium mental health podcast, Trauma or Bad Character, and the visionary behind Work for Life Nigeria, an annual nationwide mental health convergence held across states in Nigeria to promote mental health awareness, suicide prevention, hope, and collective action. She's also an author, corporate trainer, and mental health educator, passionate about making mental health practical, accessible, and a core leadership competency across Africa. Welcome to the show, Dima. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
For joining us on the show today. We're happy we're here and we are very positive that we'll have a great show today. So we'll go to our first talking point. When does normal stress become too much? Stress itself is not the the Stress itself is not necessarily the enemy. We all experience it. A deadline can make you work harder. An examination can make you study more. A major responsibility can push you to focus. In fact, some level of stress can help you respond to challenges. The problem begins when stress becomes constant and we don't have enough time, support, or resources to recover from it. Think about the average young professional today. You wake up, you check your phone, your emails, messages, deadlines, bills, transport problems, family responsibilities, work expectations, social media comparisons, and sometimes a second job or side hustle waiting after the first job is finished. There's this growing culture of being permanently busy. If you're not busy, you almost feel guilty. If you're resting, you may feel like you should be working. And if somebody asks you how you're doing, you say, I'm managing. But managing is not necessarily the same thing as being okay. The WHO notes that excessive workloads, low control over work, job insecurity, and poor working environment can create risks to mental health. So perhaps the question isn't simply, are you stressed? Almost everyone is. Almost everyone is. The more important question is, what is that stress doing to you? So, Dima, how do we distinguish ordinary stress from stress that has become unhealthy?
All right, great question. You already started off very great. I hope that you can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So you already started off great. Um, Stress itself is not usually the enemy. Just like you said, the question is, what is this stress doing to me? And so, a lot of times, we want to distinguish between stress and the stress that has become unhealthy. The first thing that we usually put into consideration is the longevity of the stress. How long have you been stressed? And how is this affecting your productivity? Sometimes we are stressed and it's affecting our productivity and we don't even know it. So things in our life starts to fall apart and we are asking what is going on. But the truth is that we might just be stressed. So, number one thing to look out for is the longevity of the stress. Maybe first of all, look at the trigger. What has brought me to the point where I am right now? After you've looked at what has brought you to that point, then you look at the longevity. Just like you said, a healthy amount of stress is okay, So let's say that you are stressed about an examination, and after that exam, probably 2 to 3 days before that examination, you're just worried and you're stressed about it and all of that. And then after the examination is over, you kind of just feel okay. But for some people, it doesn't end there. It continues even after the examination is over. It could be any other thing at all. It could be, venturing into a new career or something else. And then that doesn't just end there. So you consider the longevity and the impact that it has after that. So for someone who has to write an examination and they are feeling all stressed out, and then after the examination, they still feel stressed out to the point that it starts to affect the way that they are talking, the way that they are approaching situations, probably even start to affect their relationships, the way that they are relating to people and all that, then that becomes a big concern. That's where you draw the line between healthy stress and unhealthy stress.
Oh, I mean, you talked about longevity of the stress that that's when it becomes a problem. So do you think people become so accustomed to this stress that they stop recognizing it as a problem? Is that something that occurs frequently?
Yes, sometimes people become so accustomed that they stop recognizing it as a problem. Like just like you mentioned when you were giving the intro, sometimes people become so accustomed to stress that it becomes their identity. And because we have the idea of hustle culture, especially in this part of our world where hustle culture then crosses the line into toxicity, you see that sometimes people then embrace stress as an identity. So when they embrace stress as an identity, they stop feeling they're no longer saying to themselves that I'm tired. It becomes a question of, oh, if I stop working right now, or if I don't do this right now, I am not valuable. So they start to measure the level of their stress to the level of how productive that they are. So yes, definitely sometimes people become very, very accustomed to stress. It becomes a part of them. In fact, there are organizations and companies that even promote this culture, directly or indirectly. When you make people work so much and you do not give them the opportunity to rest, or when you reward, that's why I have a very different, or should I call it a controversial idea of excellence, because sometimes when we reward what we call excellence and hard work in our workplaces, it can send the message that it is okay to work yourself out, to stress out yourself. So people become accustomed to that idea, the identity of stress. They carry it, as a flag, as a badge of honor, that, I can stress myself. I can be up all night for 3 days and nothing will happen to me, and all of that. People start to pride in the fact that they can stress themselves so much. In fact, in my language, there is this saying that eventually became popular. Is I'm Igbo, so he said like this: "Ejigi aho anishi," which simply translates to, we don't pride in suffering. Nobody prides in suffering. But you see that sometimes people start to pride in suffering. They start to pride in stress. And so when a person starts to pride in suffering, pride in how long they can stay without getting sleep, pride in the fact that I don't even sleep up to 6 hours. All those ones are just recommended. I don't do that. Once it's 4 a.m., I'm up and about my day. So that becomes a part and parcel of them. So yes, people can get very accustomed to stress.
This is very insightful. I like how you talked about, I mean, it's not a badge of honor, just like people once tend to make you feel that, oh, I'm working too much, so I should be, that's what I should be doing. I should be, respected because I worked so hard. Now, you've also talked about some physical signs that, that somebody is going through stress. I think you mentioned some of them. But can you still talk about more of these physical signs that people can see in their body that they know that, oh, I think I'm very stressed? Because I think it has become very difficult for people to even know when they are stressed these days.
Oh yes, definitely. Number one is headache. Headache. In fact, recently I met with someone who was always complaining about headache. And I just told him to do 3 things, and within a week, he began to feel better. I told him to reduce screen time, and this screen time was equaling to work. Reduce screen time, get some more sleep. And this is, in fact, someone who also, he was priding in the fact that, oh, I don't sleep that long. Boy. I said, you need to sleep. That's why you're constantly having headaches. There's nothing wrong with you. So headache is a, a quick warning sign that you might be under stress, constant headache. And then for some people, it can also come as muscle tension. And, yes, it can come as muscle tension. It can come as weakness, fatigue, even when you've not done anything. For some people, you wake up and you're already tired even before work begins. That can be a sign of stress. And this is something that you need to look deeply into. And then changes in sleep, changes in appetite. And by changes in sleep, I mean for some people, when they are under chronic stress, their sleep pattern begin to change. So they sleep and they wake up, they sleep and they wake up. Or if there are people who sleep at around 9 p.m., they are no longer able to do that. They might be falling asleep at about 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. They're already feeling sleepy. And you're asking yourself, why am I always feeling sleepy these days? I think something is wrong with me. It could just be stress. because your body is trying to put you to rest by all means, by force. Since you've refused to rest the body, the body could just be pulling you and saying to you that, you know what, it's time for you to rest. And when that continues to happen, I believe we're going to touch on that soon. When that continues to happen, that becomes a thin line between stress and burnout, because your body pulls you to the point where you keep arguing with the body and all of that, and at some point you just fall into burnout. So changes in sleep can also happen, changes in appetite. Some people notice that they start to eat more, and for some others they start to eat less, or the things that you were craving before, you are just craving a lot of things and all that. So this can be some of the things. And there is also the increase in heart rate, when you see that probably you just walk a little bit and you're already tired, and this is not something that happens to you all the time. And then for those of us who work, you see that in your workplace you find it difficult to relax your body or relax your mind and all of that. That can also be a call to action that you are under chronic stress and that you might need to pay attention to that. So these are some physical symptoms. If you're constantly having headache, if you're constantly having muscle pulls, if your appetite has changed, your sleep pattern has changed, if you're finding it difficult to concentrate or to relax, these are all things that you need to. And by the way, one more thing, if for and this is also for those of us who work, if you find that your eyesight is becoming blurry, so you see that sometimes you're looking at something, you are not always making mistakes. Basically, you type a document and you find out that, oh, I've made a mistake, and this is happening constantly, so your eyesight become blurry. There just might be nothing wrong with you. That could also be a warning sign for stress.
So, as you were talking, I was actually thinking if I've had, some of these physical, um, you know, symptoms lately, if I've had, these things in my body, and I can actually identify with some of the points that you've given, especially the blurry, eyesight. I think that's one of the ways I know that I'm actually stressed, because I then begin to, I don't see very well when I'm stressed. So let's talk about concentration and decision making. Would you say that stress affects that?
Yes, absolutely. Stress can affect concentration and decision making. When a person is under stress, they somehow are not able to make great decisions, because that that dampens the strength of your mind. Stress dampens on the strength of your mind. So when a person is under stress, their mind kind of becomes exhausted. And of course, if your mind is exhausted, it will be very difficult for you to make decisions or think of the right. It's like a person who is angry. And that's why it's always said, don't make decisions when you are angry. And the same way, it's also encouraged not to make decisions when you are stressed, even in your relationships. If you notice that you are under stress, no matter how your partner annoys you, try not to make a decision under that stress, even if you feel that you are right. Because sometimes you just feel like, I'm right. This decision I'm making is perfect in this moment. Probably it could be a build up of several things coming up until that point. And in that particular moment, you are not stressed. It's important not to make a decision in that moment. So, yes, being stressed can actually affect your concentration and the level of attention that you pay to stuff. And so I would really love to point out that it's important not to make decisions under stress.
To understand this morning. I mean, we've just had like the first talking point, and we already have a lot of insight about this. 'Cause, you've talked about that being stressed, does not automatically mean that something is wrong with you. It's part of life. it's healthy, it can be healthy sometimes. But when it becomes persistent, overwhelming, and begins affecting your sleep, your relationships, your physical health, or your ability to function, that's when it deserves attention. Because sometimes the problem isn't that you're not strong enough, sometimes you've simply been carrying too much for too long. Which takes us to the second talking point, which is burnout. When I'm tired becomes I have nothing left. Now let's talk about burnout, because this word has become extremely popular, especially among young people. Someone has a difficult week and says, I'm burnt out. Someone has 3 deadlines and says, I'm burnt out. And sometimes we use the word so casually, but burnt out is defined by the WHO are specifically linked to chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. They actually said it has 3 dimensions, including exhaustion, mental distance, and reduced professional effectiveness. And that gives us something important to look out for. It's not simply I'm tired today. It can look more like I don't have the energy to keep doing this. I don't care anymore. What's the point? Or I'm doing the work, but I don't feel like I'm achieving anything. And it can affect how people behave at work. People become withdrawn, and people become less productive and everything. So the WHO has warned that this prolonged job stress can contribute to burnout, can contribute to fatigue, and that not every experience or exhaustion or sadness is burnt out. Sometimes it might be other things. It might be mental health issue. It might be anxiety, and that's why it requires professional assessment. And this is why we're having this conversation that we're having today. So for somebody that doesn't really have an idea what being burnt out means, Dima, can you explain to us what exactly is burnt out and how is it different from simply having a bad week at work?
All right, great. So I I'd like anyone listening to just imagine lighting up a matchstick. When you light a matchstick and it starts to burn, and then eventually you just flip off the fire, you are still able to hold the matchstick, right? But when you light a matchstick and then it burns all through, it becomes ashes and there's nothing that you can make of it. Just look at it in that way. Look at stress and burnout in that way. Look at the thin line between stress and burnout in that way. So burnout is a state of deep physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. Like you are totally wiped out and there's nothing left. No motivation, no inspiration, nothing. With stress, you are still able to manage what is it that is going on. You probably are still able to go to work and just show up normally. But with burnout, sometimes burnout can even feel like depression. And that is why diagnosis is very important, because some people can come in feeling or thinking or saying that they are depressed when in the clinical sense of it, they're just having a burnout. So the thin line, the reason the both of them look the same is that depression and burnout both come with exhaustion, both physical and mental exhaustion. The both conditions come with being extremely wiped out emotionally and mentally. But the thing with burnout is that you might still have the zeal to do what you want to do, but you just cannot bring yourself to do it. And then with depression, it's totally different because there are a lot of things. And then with burnout too, of course, it's majorly comes from work, chronic workplace stress. And then with depression, there are other things, that adds to that. So burnout is a complete state of being wiped out from work stress. So just look at it as an extreme emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion, specifically coming from work or workplace. So again, with burnout, you might wake up feeling like I want to work. I need to send that email. But you just cannot find the motivation to do it, to even bring yourself to do that. So, this is what burnout looks like for anyone who is thinking, am I just stressed or burnt out? With stress, you can still pick up that computer. The words might look blurry in your eye, but with burnout, it seems as though someone just squeezed out all the water out of you or out of a towel. And so there is nothing that you can give. Even, for example, during meetings, for someone who is burnt out, and this is someone who is always very, very verbal, very, opinionated during meetings. They're always giving, whatever it is that they think of what is being discussed. For someone who is born out, they can't seem to come up with anything. They just lose interest in whatever is happening in that particular workplace at the moment. So, and this happens when stress has been neglected, or stress, someone has become accustomed to stress, and then the longevity crosses a particular limit, and then that's when it goes into burnout.
Is is it through that most people they only realize that they're burnt out when they are completely break down, right? When they completely break down,
Yes.
that's when they realize that they're burnt out.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people only realize they are burnt out when they are completely, broken down. And so that's what we, talk about when people pride in the culture of being stressed as a symbol of I'm working hard enough. And so sometimes they may not realize it. They might still be in the mood of this is me working hard, this is me working hard, until they just realize they have woken up one morning and they are not interested in going to work. They just can't find the motivation to do anything. So people can actually get burnt out um, without realizing until that feeling actually happens. And even for some people, just like I said earlier, when they finally get burnt out, they may not even know that they have gotten burnt out. They might be thinking, oh, I'm not in the mood. So there are different languages that can show you that a person is burnt out without them even knowing it. So it could be things like I'm not in the mood. It could be things like I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't even have time for all these office meetings anymore, And they're not saying it because they're tired of their work. They're probably just saying it because they have gotten to that stage of burnt out. And some people might just start interpreting it as depression also, as I said in the beginning. So it can come in different phases, and that's why it's important to talk to a professional during the period when you are feeling like that, so that you understand specifically what is happening within you.
It's popular saying that people always say you should go for jobs that you love, go for jobs that you're passionate about. That way you don't get tired of your job. You're always excited to do that job. So does it mean that people that get burnt out don't like their jobs? Is it, or is it that it can happen? You can love your job, you can be passionate about your career. Can you do that and still experience burnout?
Absolutely, you can be very passionate about your job and still get burnt out. I mean, take content creators, for example. A lot of content creators love their jobs. I mean, some people are doing it because, we have to make money. But a lot of content creators love their job, but still not an easy job to do, to set up every day and create content, especially for people who are doing lifestyle vlogging. And now, you can't say because they love their job, if they consistently do that without taking rest, that they will not break down. So a lot of people love what they do. Some people love to be admin. Some people love to be HR. Some people love to create content. Some people love to read the news, but if they continue without, taking rest from time to time, they are definitely going to break down. So, no, the fact that you get stressed out does not mean that you do not love your job, because this is a matter of the body, the mind, and this is not something that will have control over. We are human beings, we are not computers, and so we have a maxed out limit for what our bodies can take. So even if your body can take that and you love it, it doesn't mean that you should continue taking it. For example, even with foods, like you are eating and you love this food or you love this drink, because you love this food or because you love drinking pineapple juice, does not mean that you should drink 5 liters of pineapple juice at a time. I mean, take me for example. I love pineapple juice and orange juice a lot, and so one time I was flying down to Nigeria and I had this pineapple and orange juice that was given to me, and I wanted to, cross the immigration. I was on transit. I was going to get on my next transit, to wait for my next transit. And the immigration didn't allow me to take that in. And I decided, okay, I'm just going to drink it before I get in. And then I drank the whole of it because I loved it so much. I didn't want it to go to waste. And that was the night that I saw my ancestors. So just because you love something does not mean that if you take excess of it, that you're not going to pay for it. So whether it's food or whether it's water, even water, or then walk, think about walk, you are still going to, bear the consequences if you do not take a break, if you do not take care of yourself, if you do not take care of the mind that makes the money, basically.
Actually relates to, the taking something that you love so much and then having to bear the consequences of doing that. So let's move out from the workplace now. If someone is burnt out, can it affect relationships outside the workplace, or is it mostly restricted to the workplace?
Oh, absolutely. And that's something about being burnt out. When you are burnt out, it can absolutely affect other relationships that you have outside of the workplace. So, someone is burnt out, they come back home because they are not able to process things. There is a possibility that there might be a transfer of to other people who are not workplace team members, workplace members, or colleagues, and all of that. So, because a person is burnt out and they're thinking about work and they know I still have to complete this work, but I just do not have the passion, that can create a transfer of aggression to every other person around them. So, definitely, yes, it can affect other relationships. However, there is also a positive side of it, where these relationships, our relationships, can also be a healthy shoulder for us to lean on when people are burnt out. Because sometimes what translates into this burnout, from stress to burnout, is when people, start neglecting relationships and support systems and focus wholly on work. So when you've worked, and your brain is tired, there is no support system, relationships are not there to support you, there's nobody that can give you a hug after work or from time to time, someone that you can talk to outside of work, that can then start breaking down into burnout. So, healthy relationships can also play a positive role into helping a person recover from burnout. As much as it can affect those relationships when you're already burnt out, those relationships are also important in our recovery process. So, absolutely, the response to that question is yes. Um, Being burnt out can absolutely affect our relationship. So it's important to be, keen and look out for what is really going on How am I talking? Why am I irritated? Why am I angry? What is triggering me? These are some of the questions that you can ask yourself at any point in time when the people around you are complaining and saying, you're becoming too angry, you're becoming too harsh. Don't try to shut them down. Ask yourself questions. This is where self awareness comes in so that you make sure that you're on the right track.
Much. So perhaps burnout isn't simply about being tired. It's about what prolonged unmanaged pressure is doing to the way that we feel, the way that we work, and the way that we relate to our work. And most importantly, you know, we don't have to wait until we're completely collapsed before taking our well-being seriously. Sometimes the warning signs are already there. The exhaustion, the lack of motivation, the feeling that you're constantly running, but you're never getting anywhere. And these signs, they deserve attention, which brings us to the two talking points, which is when to ask for help. And this may actually be the most important part of today's conversation because we live in a culture that celebrates resilience. Like Dr. Dima said, be strong, we take pride in being strong. Take pride in we keep going up, Everybody's going through something. There's certainly value in resilience. But this resilience, it does not mean that we should be pretending that nothing is wrong. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit that you need help. And the WHO recommends organizational approach to this mental health at work, including addressing excessive workloads, improving communication and teamwork, sorry, providing supports, making reasonable accommodations. So this isn't entirely an individual, responsibility. We often tell people manage your stress, but I think we need to take this to, another level. We need to take this to a higher level. We need to stop telling individuals to take care of themselves without telling them what's actually to do, because most people, they're burnt out and they don't even know what to do. When they talk about help, they don't even know what help means. So, Dr. Zima, when should someone stop trying to handle stress alone? And what are the signs that a professional help may be necessary?
All right, great question. So, first of all, please, if you're listening to us right now, you see, you don't need to get to chronic stress or completely get burned out before you start seeking for help. And I'd like people to know that rest is not a reward. Rest is not luxury. Rest is a necessity. You need to rest. Not even I want to rest. And that is why I personally we applaud a person who takes their rest seriously over someone who prides over I don't rest. I think that someone who takes their rest seriously is someone who that person takes their work even more seriously too. So you don't have to wait until you are totally burned out or stressed out before you start seeking for help. You need to seek for help as early as possible when you start noticing the signs. Signs like you are withdrawing, signs like you are isolating, signs like um, consistent consistent irritability, things like that. And like I said, you don't also need to wait. Some people wait to get help only when they are already saying that I can't handle this anymore. Meanwhile, you can get help, and that's also the same way some people wait to rest. You see someone who is working so hard and they're telling themselves, okay, in 3 days or like in 7 days, or next month I'm going to rest. And you're asking yourself how next month, like probably in the next 20 something days, that's when the next month is going to come. And that's when the person is planning to rest. So, the same way plan to get help when they have totally broken down. And this also happens with physical health. And you see that these things start to affect you, your environment, your relationships, and which is not okay, which is not healthy for you. Some people start to fall apart with the people around them because they are stressed, and they only realize later that it was stress that had put them in that condition. So do not wait to fall apart. Once you start noticing symptoms like anxiety, like you're always anxious, you start noticing symptoms like blurry eyes, you are always fidgeting, you become scared of work, and all of that. um you are having withdrawal, you, from people, you are trying to isolate yourself from people, and even symptoms like substance abuse. When you start seeing that you are beginning to abuse substance, you come back from work and you just want to drink something so that you can fall asleep. You start developing or engaging in unhealthy coping mechanisms. It's important to take action. Unhealthy coping mechanisms can involve things like substance use and even pornography, doing things that on a normal day you will not do them. These are all coping mechanisms that you are probably wanting to develop because at the moment you no longer feel happy or satisfied with what you are doing. You are working, but you're not satisfied about it. You just feel off, you just feel bland or blank. So at all of these points, at any point in time, is very, very important to seek help. It's very important to go for mental health checkups, the way that we also do physical health checkups. Even from time to time, some people do physical health checkups, even when they are not feeling any symptoms at all. They're just like, you know what, let me go check up on myself. In the same way, mental health is even more severe because a lot of times you can't see the physical symptoms, but something is definitely going on and they are affecting the things and the people around you. But because you're not feeling fever, you're not having a headache, most of the times you just think I'm okay. Meanwhile, things are getting damaged, foundations are getting damaged. So it's important to do mental health checkups, go for clinical checkups, diagnoses, and all of that. Talk to a professional, talk to a therapist from time to time. This will really help. So basically, please do not wait until you completely fall apart before you seek help.
Oh, I guess many people have heard that. I mean, people treat mental checkups like you have to be going insane before you go for mental checkups. I think that's like a kind of stereotype that surrounds that. So especially in this part of the world where when you hear that someone is going for therapy, they feel like, oh, the person has to be going crazy to want to go for therapy. So this is actually very insightful, knowing that you don't have to necessarily be going crazy to see a mental health professional. It's just like doing a normal checkup, a normal health checkup. So I'm really grateful that you were able to touch on that. Now, there's also something that happens in this part of the world where people are not able to speak to their employers about their workload, and approach their employers when they feel like it's too much for them. So I want you to speak on that. Like, how should people do that?
I believe, and I also always tell employers this during workplace training. I always say this to employers: the mental strength of your employees is the mental strength of your organization. So if your employees are mentally healthy, definitely your workplace, there'll be productivity, there'll be positivity, and there will be profits. These three things are definitely going to improve and increase. Sometimes employers think that investing in the mental health of their employees is a waste of money or a waste of time, but it all has an adverse effect on, who they are, how we are productive. Let's take for example, the police. And I often say this, even the other time when I was training some security managers and people is security managers and people in security leadership. I gave some of these examples to them. And one of the things that I said to them is, imagine um, a field work policeman, I hope that's what they are called, coming into the office and saying, Oga, as I was coming to work today, my wife was so angry with me that she slapped me, and she even broke my my windshield, like my car glass. She broke it. And as this man is saying this thing, he breaks down crying. And I asked, as a leader, what are you going to do? And this person is supposed to be maybe somewhere out there on the road, attending to people and all that, probably be at some checkpoint or whatever. And this person is telling you what has just happened to them, and they are crying. And someone said, well, I wouldn't expect this person to bring their family issues to work and all that. And I said, okay, good. So this person, you tell the person, okay, oh, sorry, but please, you need to go to field work. This is your checkpoint where you're supposed to be situated today. And this policeman heads to that point and stands there, and he's angry. He's thinking about what's going on while also trying to talk to people. Eventually, a woman comes along, and he tells the woman, park. And the woman parks. Come down. Bring out your license. Why are you driving like that? And the woman, why are you harassing me? What's going on? Have I done something wrong? And he starts saying to the woman, who are you asking that stupid question? That what have you done wrong? And maybe the next thing might even slap the woman, or say something like, seize the car key or license and say, meet us at the office. All these things, this anger becomes disproportionate to the situation. But then when you look at it deeply, you see that it's coming from an earlier experience, something that was not taken care of, the fact that he was not heard. He had come with this thing to work, but he was not listened to, and he was still sent into the field. And then when he got there, what did he do? He became a nuisance. And this is how we recycle trauma. This is what I call recycled trauma, in my opinion. So employers need to understand that employees will continue to recycle trauma if they do not pay attention to them. And this recycled trauma, in our Nigerian slang, we say it go reach everybody. Everybody go collect. That's how we say it in Nigeria. So even you as an employer, you will collect if you do not pay attention to the mental health of your employees, and even to your own mental health. So it's important to create a safe space. I'm not saying that employers should become therapists or psychologists, or that workplaces should become psychiatric hospitals, or psychological clinics. Of course not. But let's create safe spaces. I encourage employers to create safe spaces. Someone comes to work, they're not happy, they're looking a type of way. So of course there is always a balance, which is why training your employees on mental health is very important, because they also learn emotional intelligence. They now know that, so they're not going to come to work every day and present one issue or another. They know exactly how to go about it. And then you as an employer, you also have the emotional intelligence to, harvest whatever it is they are saying. It may not even be you, it might be the HR, someone that they can talk to. It's important for an employee to be able to tell HR that, oh, this is what I'm going through, or to tell any manager, this is what I'm going through. Even though that stuff will not be sorted, just the ability to open up without having to work on eggshells give them the opportunity to also put in their best into their work. So it's not even necessarily just for the sake of the employee, it's for the sake of the employer and the organization at large. So I encourage employers to please create safe spaces for their employees, do mental health trainings, also do like we offer things like drafting mental health policies for organizations that help them, that work with them, that work for them and with them. So depending on your organization, we then craft mental health policies that are specific to your organization and to your employees, so that everybody knows, okay, this is what they're getting. There are employees that also give to their there are employers that also give their employees therapy sessions from time to time. It could be once a month, just to give them, just to put their headspace in a particular place. So it's very, very, very important for things like this to exist in organizations.
I mean, this is such a broad topic, and we wish we had more time to, delve into more questions and, more concerns about this. But we've had time as we've had a time that's well spent. I mean, we've been able to touch on so many things. So, but in 1 minute, just for people watching, in 1 minute, how do you think we should approach people that we suspect are struggling or going through this? Because I think that's an issue that needs to be addressed. So please, in 1 minute, just let us know.
Great. You're very right. Like the way that mental health is a topic, and it never can be finished in a session. But the little knowledge we share is always powerful. Um, so in 1 minute, of course, how do we approach people who are going through, or who we assume are going through, because it's always an assumption until the person is diagnosed. So if you feel like someone is going through something, of course the first thing to do is to offer them help, right? Offer them help. um we should not diagnose people, because that also amounts to stigmatization, which is a very big issue, which is one reason why people do not open up. And in fact, also talking about workplace, I heard of a story where a guy resumed work, and after he resumed work, let's say today, the following day the following day was, he had been going to therapy, so the following day was his day that he actually meets his therapist. So he told HR, I'll need to speak. Immediately fire therapy, therapy at all, and all of that. They didn't find it something that is reasonable enough. And that is how we stigmatize mental health in this part of our world. The moment someone says, I'm going through it, and in fact these days people make a whole lot of joke about it, and that's not something I appreciate at all. So number one, let's not diagnose people at them. Everything that we say should be on assumption. Just always point people to professional help is what I would say. And then try not to stigmatize people. Stigmatization can come in different forms to anyone listening. Stigmatization can even come in the form of saying things like, me will like my life like this, depressed care, or me will like my life stressed, too stress help. But the truth is that as long as you are a human being, and you are susceptible and vulnerable to physical health, you are also susceptible and vulnerable to mental health. But a lot of people like to pride in the fact that it can never get to them. And that's a big lie. And this type of people, I've seen it get to them, and get to them to the point that it almost even wants to take their life. So please try not to stigmatize, try to be a safe space for other people, and try to point people to professional help at any point in time.
Thank you, Zeus. Thank you so much for that. And perhaps that's why we should, leave this conversation. Taking care of your mental health doesn't mean you're weak. Taking a break doesn't mean you're lazy. And asking for help doesn't mean you're failed. Sometimes your body and your mind are simply telling you that the way you're living or working is no longer sustainable, and we should learn to listen. Stress is part of being human. Work can be stressful, life can be stressful, bills can be stressful, relationships can be stressful. And nobody is suggesting that we eliminate every difficult experience from our lives. But there's a difference between having a stressful day and living in a constant state of stress. There's a difference between being tired after a long week and feeling emotionally and physically depleted for a prolonged period. And there's the difference between saying I'm having a difficult time and ignoring persistent symptoms that your body, that's affecting your ability to function. So I'm happy we could have that conversation. Thank you so much, Dima, for being on, the show today. We had such a swell time. Thank you for pointing us in, as a mental health specialist, and you're helping so many people come out of this, and we're grateful that you're able to make time to be with us today. Thank you so much. Okay. And that's where we, pull the curtain on the front burner. And when we come after the break, we'll have the news on the hour.
At LN247, we